Welcome everyone. My name is John Herzog. I'm your instructor for this term. We're going to have session one now, and as you can see in the top of the screen, I just have a welcome screen, but I'm going to be typing notes there, just some things that I think you're going to need to remember. And on occasion here, we're going to actually have Microsoft Access on my screen. So let me give you some insight as to how the class will go for the first few minutes, and then we'll get right into our lecture. First, please be sure to look on Pilot for the syllabus. The syllabus has all the assignments, all the due dates, and all the information that you'll need for the quizzes and things like that. Please keep looking at it because we may make some changes depending on how well things go here. If we get through more material than we expected or less, we may modify the syllabus. So please keep tabs on it. But I will let you know, one way or the other, I'll communicate that to you. Each Sunday night at 8 o'clock p.m. we'll have a question and answer session online. So if there's things about the book or these lectures that aren't making sense, or if you're having trouble with the assignments, that would be the time to bring them up. And everybody can listen to everybody else's questions, and we can hopefully have it become very productive. If all else fails, if you cannot make the 8 o'clock session on Sunday night, if you have to work or whatever, or for some reason you can't go online for whatever reason, I'm going to give you my cell phone number. It's 937-206-3423, and that is also in the that's also going to be listed in the syllabus as well. So there'll be 7 quizzes. The quizzes will be based upon the information we cover in each of the 7 weeks sessions. There will be 10 assignments. Again, those assignments will be listed in your syllabus. So they're all in your textbook that you've received for this class. And so anyway, let's go ahead and begin now on talking about databases, Microsoft and specifics, but databases also. Before you start doing things with a database, okay, there are certain things you need to remember. First of all, number one is why a database and instead of a spreadsheet. That's the first thing, if I can learn to type here. Why a database and not a spreadsheet? Well, the reason is because there's several reasons. One is because with a spreadsheet you have data redundancy. And a spreadsheet, what I mean by that is if I, for example, wanted to type up orders in a business, and I type in the customer information and then I type up the order. If I put those orders in a spreadsheet, I would have to type the name, address, city, state, zip of every customer every time they would come in. And every time they do come in, which we hope they would come in more than once, we would be redundant. We would be typing the same data over and over and over again. That's how it would be if you typed orders in a spreadsheet, and that is why a spreadsheet is not recommended for things such as that. There are thousands of examples of where, therefore, spreadsheets would not be very practical. So we're trying to eliminate redundancy. The second reason that we have, of course I need the redundancy, sorry, I spelled that correctly. Let me fix that redundancy. Anyway, the second reason, we eliminate redundancy. But the second reason we have it is because reports and data entry are much easier. Sorry, data entry are much easier. You can, well, let's go with reports for just a minute. If you have a spreadsheet with people's transactions in there, and I wanted to send a statement to those people, I would not want to have to print a bunch of lines and highlight the lines that are relevant to the customer or whomever. What I want to do is to take all those lines from the spreadsheet, for example, and instead put them in a database, and then I would take all of those lines and print them on one page for customer 1, and then I'd print other lines on another page for customer 2, and so forth. So reporting is much better in the database, much, much better than it is in a spreadsheet. In fact, many of the things we do with the database actually is something that's very good, is that we can make like payroll checks, and we can make it come right out on the check, where spreadsheets are very clumsy, would never be able to do those. So again, spreadsheets are good to a point, but they're not even close to getting what you need in other areas. Again, finally, you have data entry. Data entry is much easier on a database too, not only because databases eliminate redundancy, but because they have they can make them user friendly. You can have drop down list boxes. You can search much easier, and again, the screens can be much more easy to use. again, much more efficient and effective than that of a spreadsheet. So those are the reasons that we have databases and that they are much better than a spreadsheet. So we're going to talk about some of the basic terms that you would need to be aware of when you have a specific record of a person. That's often referred to, well, I mean, sometimes they will call them rows. Now what I'm going to do is I'm going to give you an example of one. I'm going to put an Access database on screen. Okay, so on your screen there, you should see a database table example here. And the database is actually showing you records. Every line here is a record. As I go down the line here, you can see those are often referred to as rows. Now, within each of these rows, they each contain a field. For example, the company name of this customer, the contact first name, each of those are what they call a field. When you type something in there, that's referred to, whatever the nature is of what you type is referred to the field value. For example, if I were to type numbers in there, it would be a numeric value. If I type in words, it would be considered a text value. Now, this over here, if you notice here, it says this is the customer number. This is something that is unique about every customer. Many times people will use telephone numbers, social security numbers, but many people just use Microsoft Access to have it automatically assign a number to each different person so that no two records are alike. If you have two Jane Smiths or two John Smiths, even at the same address, you've got to make sure that you know which is which. And so that's why we have an identifier here. The unique identifier is referred to as the primary key. Remember that. That's a very important point. So when you call a pizza place and they ask you for your telephone number, that's the primary key. That's what makes you different from any other customer that calls in. Well, in this case, the customer ID that's been assigned, or a customer number, that is the unique identifier. It is called the customer, or the primary key. So these are all called records. Now, eventually you'll see it will hook up with another record here in just a minute. If you'll take a look at my screen here, these are the actual agreements. Now, just to kind of get you in the loop here, this is a company that does landscaping. So every customer has an agreement. So you'll notice here that in this particular table, customer number 11,008 is the one who bought this contract that you see on your screen. If you click back over to customer, if you see back over here on customer, 11,008 is this, what is Amal Mahita, whatever it is. Anyway, that's the person, Melissa Caputo, rather, excuse me, Melissa Caputo. She is customer number 1108. So if you click on agreement, you'll see that is the number that has been assigned to that first contract. Now again, in the customer table, the customer number is the primary key, but the field that it links up with over here in agreement is referred to as the foreign key. That is what it hooks up with in the second table. That's why they call this a relational database, and this is why you don't have to have this data redundancy. All I need to do is to enter in the data about the customer once. Then all I have to do is assign that number to every order. So I'm not retyping names, addresses, city, state, zips, and telephone numbers and all these things. So that's why we refer to it as that. Now, in order to make one of these, in order to start making the databases, I'm going to give you some ideas here, but I want you to kind of walk through me. You should be able to see everything on my screen. I'm going to close this database here. I may reopen it later on, but I'll start a brand new one here. One of the things that is important to understand about a database and Access is it is different from Word and Excel in that you have to name it up front. You can't name it after you're finished. You've got to give it a name first. Why? The reason is because the databases hold what they call objects. Objects. The thing I just showed you were tables. The tables are the things that hold the basic data and information about your clients. So when you create a database, you have to make these tables, and all these tables are created in one file. So therefore, when you create a database, when you open up Microsoft Access, in fact, what I'm going to do, I'm going to close Microsoft Access. Let me just close it all here. I'm going to go back to my son and daughter-in-law. Anyway, but if you click on Access here, you'll see when you go into it, immediately it'll give you this screen here where we're going to make a blank desktop database. So when you click blank desktop database, it will take you to this screen here. And what you need to do, now feel free to pause this anytime if you need to take notes or what have you. But what you'll do then is you will tell it where you want to save it. And the way you do that is by clicking over here where it says Browse for a location to put your database, that little tiny folder there. And when you click on that, it'll ask you where you want to put it. Now in this case, I'm just going to put it on my desktop, but you can put it anywhere you want. And we're going to call it Belmont Landscaping. Down below here where it says file name, I'm going to call it Belmont, because we don't want it to don't ever call it database 1, and don't ever name a table table 1. We want to know what the database and the table contain. So it's better to name them, giving an idea what the content is. So this is Belmont, and we're going to call it Belmont Landscaping. And if you just named it Belmont, that's okay, Landscaping. Oopsie, I just cannot type the date. Belmont Landscape, we click OK, and it's saying, okay, fine, that is what we're going to name it, and it's going to send it to the C drive, to the desktop, and if I just simply click Create, in a few seconds I have now my first database. Now, I'm now ready to start creating a table that will have all the data in it that I want to keep, or all the data that I want to store. Now, a couple things here. You'll notice I'm going to try to give you some heads ups here. The first thing that we'll do when you open up Microsoft Access is it's going to start making a table for you. There's a true-false question on the exam that asks you that, or the quiz, I should say, and that is true. That is what it will do. Now, again, the rows in the table are called records. The columns are called fields. That is also a quiz, if you will, or test question here. Now, what we do here is we start naming them. You saw that we had a database here that was keeping track of customers. Now, the ID is the one that comes up, and Microsoft automatically makes that the primary key for you. So if you just leave that there. If you want to name it maybe customer ID, you can go back and do that later. We'll do that in just a minute. But if you click right here where it says click to add, it's going to say, okay, you're about to add a field. What kind is it? Again, what value, what data value do you want in there? Well, we want this to be text because it's going to be nothing more than the customer's first name. So we're going to click short text. If you click long text, you really don't want to do that unless you want unlimited space. Short text will hold only 255 characters, but that's a lot. But if you do the one down here, long text, that's what they often refer to as the memo field. But the long text will have unlimited. And you don't want that huge field if you just want something like a first name or a last name. Now, before I go any further, please remember that before you even start to make your tables, you need to have figured out what fields you need. In this particular case, we're keeping track of customers for a landscaping firm. But the types of information you would need for that would be much different than what it would be, say, for an emergency room, or for a floral shop, or for a pizza parlor, or whatever. So you need to ask the people you're building the database for exactly what data they need to capture. Now, we're assuming that's already been done, and we're assuming now that this landscaping firm is going to need the first and last name and address of the people who they're serving here. So let's go in and do that now. We're going to make this first field a short field, or short text, and then once the word field 1 pops in there. So we're going to put in there contact first name. Now when you type in those names of the fields, you notice that gets cut off. If you ever use Microsoft Excel, you know you can place your mouse right there on the line there and click and drag, and you can widen that. So anyway, we're going to click to add, and the next one short text, and the reason short text is at the top is because the most common types of fields you'll make are short text. So we're going to put in here contact last name. It's very rare that I would recommend that you would have just contact name, because oftentimes you want to use this database to send them a letter, and you don't want it saying Dear John Herzog. You would like it to be more personal, saying Dear John or what have you. It's also much easier to sort your data if in fact you have first and last names. So the next field is going to be the address. We're going to click to add in short text. Again, we're going to make it address, and we hit enter. And then we click to add again. We're going to put in here for the short text city, state, zip. Again, I really don't recommend that you make a field like that. We're just doing this in the interest of simplicity, so that we can, well, just kind of show you what we're doing. But Again, if I want to say, show me everybody from Dayton, Ohio, or from Washington, D.C., I really need a separate field for that. It's easier to sort your records that way, but just in the interest of time and simplicity, we're going to call it city, state, zip. Now, you can put lots of different things in there, but these are all short text fields. The only time I recommend you do a long text, I'm going to put that in there now, is if you want to put a comments field. And that way there's no limit to how much data you can put in there. Another type of field you can put in here would be the number field. The number field is only to be used if it's a calculation, because if it's a telephone number, a zip code number, you want to make those text. The reason is if you make it a number field will always cut off the first zero, and there are some phone numbers and social security numbers and zip codes that begin with a 0. So you only want to make it a field of number value. It should only be a number or numeric value only if you're going to do math with it. Multiply it or add it to something else. So we're going to call this a number field, but this is going to be the square footage of the firm. You know, these people, as you are well aware, is square footage is probably going to be relevant when they're doing the landscaping. So like, how big is the yard? That way, if they want to quote them, say, a price per foot or per square foot, they can use that as in the calculation. We can also put another field in here that's a currency type. If you click currency, in this example, this is going to be called the credit limit. So this is something else you may choose to track for your customers. Date and time, we basically could click that. It must only be a date or time that's entered in there. And let me explain a few things about these field values. So I'm going to go in there and put in there, again, date entered. Date entered. Now, the thing you have to remember about these data types, the number field, the currency field, and the date entered have to have the legitimate information put in. For example, I cannot put in like not applicable in a number field. It's looking for a number. So you cannot type any text in there. I can type numbers in a text field, but I cannot type text in a number field. The same with the currency field and the same with the date field. Now the date field is even a little bit more particular. The date field will even require that it be a legitimate date. You cannot enter in there January 56th, 2014. It's got to be obviously January 1st through the 31st. And if you try to enter in anything different than that, anything like February 39th, whatever, it'll stop you and say, wait, that's not legitimate. Now, before we add our next field here, again, I know I'm kind of rushing through this, so please feel free to stop and go back if you need to replay. And again, everything I'm showing you is in your textbook, and if you're following along here, we are basically on page AC9 of your textbook. In AC11, we're showing you how to create a table in a datasheet view. So all of this actually up through AC13, we've done all of these things. AC15, we're actually up to that. That's about as far as we've gone so far. But before you go any further, over here on the left, we have what we refer to as the navigation pane. And that basically will show you all the different objects you've created. Right now we have created table 1, and we're going to rename that as customer in just a few minutes. But it'll keep a list of all the tables and queries, or we'll talk about these things later, the queries, the forms, and everything that you are going to be creating here. So let's go ahead and save this table. You can save it at any time. And so if you go in the upper left and click the Save button, we're going to type in there, we're just going to call it Customer, and click OK. And by doing that, you'll see the navigation pane over here says we now have one table, and it is called Customer. Now, the problem is the navigation pane can sometimes be a pain. It can be in your way. So if you see where I'm pointing there with the mouse with the little double arrow, if you click that little double arrow, or if you just simply hit the F11 key, that will open it and close it to get it out of your road when you're entering things. So as we continue to enter new fields in here, that's the type of thing that we can do. Let me show you some other fields you can put in there. We go click to add again way over here. We're going to call this next field a yes/no field, which must be only a yes or no. It cannot be a maybe. And this is, for example, if the customer is active or not. Active question mark. So we can say, well, yeah, if the person is active, we could then click it, you see, and it will automatically put a checkbox there. So that may be the type of thing that you would be wanting to do. So that's only yes or no. It cannot be anything in between that, anything other than that. Now, rich text I'm not going to deal with right now, and hyperlink I will. If you click on hyperlink, we're going to type, for example, the person's email address. That way, if you capture that inside the table, you don't have to copy and paste the email onto the web. All you need to do is to click the data, and it will automatically take you to begin an email. So that's the first part of making a database, is making it so that you can make a table. Now, a couple things here I wanted to show you. Um, the table itself, we're going to come back and we're going to enter in a record. Now, entering records, again, is covered on page AC15, and we're not going to type all those records, but you can try it, just to try your hand at this. But you simply click in the box, and it says contact first, and we're going to call it John, and hit enter, and then contact last. Again, we may have to widen that column like we can in Excel, or you can just double click that and do a best fit. So I can double click over here on this line between city, state, zip. I can double click on that line and it can widen it there. The contact last name, we're going to type in Herzog there. An address, I'm going to put in my address. It's not my real address, 123 4th Street. And we're going to call it Dayton, Ohio. Actually, there's some poor soul that lives in Dayton, Ohio that probably gets a lot of my mail. But anyway, 454, I'm just making this up here. Okay, and I'm going to say comments like I am the instructor, whatever. You can do whatever you want here. But you can see here as you're entering the data, it's very much like that of entering it in a spreadsheet if you've ever used a spreadsheet. So basically that is how you set up a table, and that is how you would put in data. And again, we have covered everything up through page 1 through or AC1 up through AC19. And you can see even in AC19 it shows us how to save a table, which we've already done here. And so again, we've covered a lot of territory in these first few minutes here. Now I'm going to go ahead and close this table. You don't want to click the upper right X. You want to come down here and click the lower X here, right above the field. And it's going to ask if I want to save the changes. Now here's something you need to remember here, folks. First, it will automatically save a record. You have no choice in the matter. The only thing it's asking about saving here is the layout of the table. And the reason it's asking me that question is because I resized that contact last name field a minute ago. You may remember that. So basically, this is a way of it saying, do you want me to keep that width? Or, so anytime you change the structure of the table, not the data, but the structure, it'll ask you if you want to save. So I'm going to say, yes, I want to save that, and then it closes it. But now, if I go back into the navigation pane and hit the F11 key, there's my customer table. I can double click it and I can bring it right back. And now I'm going to put down here contact first name. Again, I'm going to put in here Jane Smith. And there's probably 100 of them out there, Jane Smith. And you see now I have a second record in there. Notice that the primary key that was automatically put in there for me by Microsoft. Remember, Microsoft starts a table for you when you open it, when you create a new database. And it's automatically auto-numbering that for me. So if I have 2 Jane Smiths or 100 of them, I can distinguish between one and the other by that primary key. Now notice if I go up here to close this now, it will not ask me if I want to save because it's an automatic save. Every record, when you go from one record to the next or close the table, any one of the above, it will automatically save the record. So I'm going to double click that, open it again, and you'll see that it's still there. So that is how you visit, as they say, or open a table. And basically that takes you up through page AC22. Now to close the table I just showed you, you can close access by simply clicking the X in the upper right. So anyway, that's what I wanted you to be able to know how to do. So let's begin with that, and then I'm going to show you in a few minutes how to bring other. Okay, continuing now, something that they're asking you to do or showing you how to do on page AC 26 is to copy records from one place to the other. This is something you need to be aware of, and this is also a quiz question. You are able to import things from spreadsheets, from text files, as well as some other databases and even other Access databases. What happens is oftentimes people will say, you know what, we're using spreadsheets now, and spreadsheets are really not very effective. In fact, they find that they're very limited, so we want to go and make a good database. so we could be more effective and more efficient in what we do. Well, what the fear that people have is they say, well, yeah, but what about all of our old data? Well, if you've already started a spreadsheet or you've already started a database, and some of them have been using databases and spreadsheets for years, but they want to put them in the better database, what you simply do is you copy them. Now, in this particular case here, you'll notice I've got a mock-up of what we were working on. It's a little different, but let's suppose you have an empty table here. Now, in order to copy things from another table, step one, make sure that you have your table open. Step two, open the table that has the data you want copied. Now, in this particular case, it's customer. So if I double-click customer and I bring that in, you'll see these are all the ones I want to copy. Step three, I do a select all. Select all can be done by a Control-A on your keyboard or by simply clicking on this little box in the upper left to the left of the word customer number. Up in the upper left there, if you click on that, it selects all the records. Step four, you click copy up here up in your clipboard group, and then you simply go back to the table to which you want to put things in. However, you do not want to click paste. You want to click in the little drop down, the little triangle here under paste, and click paste. Everything went in there, and it'll give you a confirmation. So that is how you would copy records from another Access database. I mean, you can open a whole other database and do that, or you can simply open another table in the system and where you are. Now, so that's something you need to be aware of. Next, I want to show you how to navigate. To navigate in a screen here, you notice in the very bottom here, you see I'm in record 1 of 38. So I can click on the little arrow to the right of the 38, and that will take me down one record at a time. Now, after having gone down a few records, now you'll see the button to the left of 12 of 38. You see that if you click to the left, that'll bring you up a record. The far left one will take you to the first record. The one over here, of the four going left to right, or the four navigation buttons going left to right, the fourth one from the left here, that will take you to the last record. And then the fifth button will take you to a new or a blank record. So that is something else you need to be aware of. So this is how you build a table, this is how you navigate a table, and this is how you copy the data to a table. I want to show you one more thing here. For just a moment now, I want to go back to the original table we created. You'll notice here that this says ID on it. This ID column here is an auto number, where the one we were just looking at was not. It was one you had to actually come up with a number. Again, the one we were just looking at, if I'll go back to it, these numbers here were typed in individually. Those are not auto numbers. It's very difficult to copy from one to the other with that format because you have to contend with that auto number. You cannot change that auto number. That auto number, you later on in the class, I'll try to show you. I mean, I know how. If we have time, I'll show you how you can set it where you want it. So if you want it to start out with 20,000, rather than starting out with number 1, some organizations do that. Some people say we don't want it to. We have invoices already going through like 19,000, so we'd like to start with record or invoice number 20,000. You can do that, but otherwise, as a procedure, you do it, but you cannot just paste it in there. You can't just type it in. Now, what I wanted to show you here was you may want to rename that field. Instead of ID, you may want to double-click. You can just double-click the word ID, and double-clicking up there puts it in a rename mode. So we're going to call this customer number as we had it in the other one. But again, this is an auto number field. Now, another few things you need to be aware of. Notice when you click in these fields, and you click up here in the table tools where it says fields, it tells you some information about it. Now, let me go back to, I'm going to resize customer number. I'm going to click on it, and you'll see when I click on customer number, up here it says the type of that is an auto number field. Now, the other thing is, if I go to contact first, you'll see now the data type changes to short text. Notice also, please, that it tells us the field size. That's 255 characters. Now, folks, I would strongly not recommend that you have 255 characters in a name field, especially a first or last name. I recommend for a first name 25 characters. For this last name, I always give you this little pop-up. Just say, yes, we know it's going to change the size, and it will cut off data, folks. If you do reduce the size of that field, And if you have, like, say, fields with 25 characters in it and you cut it down to 20, you will lose data, and they're just warning you of that. So if you click on contact last name, and then you can come up here again, we're going to change that to 50. I recommend 50 for a last name. And again, when I go to the next field, it's going to say, sure, you could lose some data. Yes, we know. You click yes. And addresses, I also recommend that they be a size 50. Okay, so you click 50 there. And again, you try to go to city, state, zip. It'll give you the pop-up, but you click, the pop-up comes up, and you say, yes, I know. And we're going to change city, state, zip. Also, I would recommend, again, I'd recommend 50 characters for city, state, zip, and so on. Comments, if we click on comments, it does not let us, it ghosts. You cannot set the comments, because if you remember, we made that a long text. So there's no setting that. If you click square footage, you'll notice that's a number field, and there's ways you can control the size of a number field, but you don't do it in the datasheet view. Again, we are in what they call the datasheet view. The datasheet view is called that because it resembles that of a spreadsheet. But I'm going to show you how to make some of these same changes and more in what they refer to as the design view. So if we click on the currency, the format type, we can change that currency to the euro or whatever. But if you just click on footage here, you see format, you can change that to general number and whatnot. But number here, it's either number or it isn't. But there's different sizes of fields for numbers. We click on the date entered, you'll see it doesn't give you the option. Again, the field size is ghosted, just as it is for the active field, which is yes, no. The email, those you cannot, the only ones you can actually set a field size is the text fields. So you need to remember that. Now, at this point, what I want to show you here is you have what they refer to as the design mode. The design mode is what is used to change the structure of an object. In this case, the object we're working in is a table. Later on, we will make a form and a query and a report. And that will be the extent of what we do in our first session here. But again, these sessions will probably last pretty close to the better part of an hour here. And again, you can replay them as many times as you want. The book is very good, but also feel free to contact me on my cell phone if the book and or this session doesn't cut it. And in fact, if you want to meet somewhere on campus, if you can, I can do that as well. Anyway, going back to the subject here, there are two ways to build a database table, and that is in the datasheet view and in what they call the design view. Now, the design view, if you click in the upper left, you'll notice that little pencil and T-square up there. I can change the structure, not the data, but the structure of the table by clicking on that pencil and T-square. Now, if I make a form and a report and a query later, that is also used to change their structures. But we'll talk about that later. Anyway, if I click View on that little pencil T-square, I'm going to click it, you'll notice that these field names here, they're all there. The field names and the field types are there as well. So you see, what I can do is I can come in here and I can add another field. For example, I'm going to click on the last row here, I should say the first blank row. I'm going to type in there property photo. I know landscaping firms often take a picture of their property, so we're going to put property photo there. Now you may notice when we were building this table that some of the field type I'm about to use was not available in that list, but it's available here. This is why you would want to put in, we're going to use this what they call an OLE object field. An OLE object field actually stores a file. So a file could be a photograph, it could be a soundbite, it could be, for example, some people use these database tables to do human resources. So they will actually store an employee or an applicant's Microsoft Word resume in their record, and that's where you would put it in an OLE object field, which stands for Object Linking and Embedding. So that's why you would have to come to the design view. You can't put that in the other view. Other things that you can do here, notice if I come back to the square footage, something that wasn't available in the datasheet view that is here, is if you click now in the data type, you can see I can still change the data type here, but down below they have what they call the property sheet. Now the property sheet is where you change any attributes of a field. Properties meaning attributes or characteristics. Well, one of the characteristics of a field is its size. So what we can do here is we can click long integer and click way over here on this little drop-down list box, and we can change it to single. Now, I wouldn't, in fact, I don't recommend that, but I mean, if you want to change a number field to single, that would only allow you to do a number that is like a 3 point something or less. It's strictly designed for real numbers, or as we would say, decimals. But it's only for very, very small numbers. If I were to click double, that would make it a much larger. I could get tens of thousands or millions in there, but I would still be able to have a decimal on it. So for example, for square footage, I may want to change that to double if I want to say that the square footage of the property is 25,000.5 feet. Well, the only way I can do that is with the double field. I can't do a single because single will not allow that big of a number. So I could also just make it an integer. I could say, well, I'm not interested in it being a decimal. I don't really want to, I'll round it off. Well, so if you have it as an integer or a long integer, those are 4 sizes that you have as options. Long integer, integer, double, and single. Remember, single is very small and with decimals. Double is very large numbers with decimals. Integer is a small number, usually into the tens of thousands, but is a whole number. You cannot put decimals in an integer, obviously. And long integer would be much bigger numbers, into the hundred thousands or millions. So anyway, those are the different ways you would change those, the width of the number fields. Another thing that would be kind of nice is so that you don't have to type in some things. So we can put in what they refer to as a default value. Now you'll notice here for the number field, the default value was 0. It automatically puts in a 0 unless you type over it. But we could come up here, for example, to the date entered, where it says date time. We're going to click on that, and we're going to put in here the default value. We're going to type in their date, left parentheses, right parentheses. And when you hit enter, what that will automatically do is it will automatically assign today's date, whatever the computer date is. It will automatically put that in there so you don't have to stop and type those dates in when you enter the record. I strongly recommend that type of field be in every table you make, because there's always going to be coming a time when you will have a problem and someone will say, well, when was this entered? And you'll be able to tell them. So that's important. So default values are very good. Or another example, if I could say, well, most of my customers are from Dayton, Ohio. So if I click up here on city, state, zip, I'll come down here to Dayton, default value, just type in there Dayton, comma, OH, and 45421 or whatever. Most customers, I forgot to put, I got to put the quotation marks in there. Sorry about that. Don't forget to put quotation marks. Microsoft used to put those in there for you, but now so you got to put them in there for them. And they kind of goofed on that. Anyway, so those are default values. Another thing, yeah, but if you put text in, don't forget to put the quotation marks in, like I did. Again, I forget because I've used Microsoft Access for decades, and only when they came out with the most recent versions did they require you now to put in the quotation marks. The validation rule, that's so that people cannot put in garbage as well. For example, so that somebody would not accidentally put in a negative value for the square footage, you can go to square footage and put in the default value would simply say greater than 0. It's got to be greater than 0. Actually, let's put in there greater than or equal to 0. That way, if nobody knows this, hang on, what do they do to me here? Give me a second. I put that in the wrong spot. Sorry about that. It's the, yeah, I hope you're having a better day than me. Yeah, validation rule, greater than or equal to 0. That way, if people are thinking about, well, what is the square footage, we still want to use that default value of 0. Let's put that default back there of 0. For the validation text, we can put in a little error message saying you must enter a number that is either 0 or positive. So it's just a way of telling the person if they accidentally put a negative number in there, it's saying, well, here's why you're getting the error. So that way it will not let them do so. Notice, please, also, as we go through these fields, as I click on the contact first name, the field size is 25, so the changes we made in the datasheet view, they come through, and you can see them here now. So everything you change in the datasheet view will be changed here as well. The description over here is optional. This is just a note to yourself as to what you were thinking when you gave this field the name you did. But it's also good because when a person is entering the data, when they go to this field, the note that you have there can be visible on many computers. So for example, if I put in here comments, if I were to put a thing in here that says enter any miscellaneous data here, well, then the person reading this as they're entering the data, that will be a little thing that might pop up. It doesn't always. It depends on how Access is installed. Sometimes it won't show up, but it should show up in the lower left of their screen, so it just kind of gives them a little prompt as to what you're looking for there. Another thing you have to deal with is that you cannot use a period in a name of a field. And so, for example, when we have customer number up here, we had to spell the word number out. But some people say, you know, I would really rather it say customer ID. Well, what you can do is you can't name it I period D period, but you can come down and change the caption to say customer I period D period, and the caption can be anything you want. You're not limited to anything there. You can have any kind of punctuation in there and whatnot that you want. So that's why oftentimes people will have the caption changed. A lot of organizations will oftentimes remove the spaces in their field names. You notice that's what I'm doing right now. I'm changing these so that there's no space between contact first name and contact last name. I've removed the spaces. Why am I doing that? Some organizations will require that because oftentimes the databases you create in Microsoft Access, some companies or government agencies will say, we need you to send that data into our mainframe. But a lot of the mainframes will not accept a field name with a space in it. So that's why you have to remove the spaces, but then it's not very user-friendly. So that's why we can go back to contact first name and then come down here to caption, and we type in there contact space. We can put the spaces in there, you see. So that is why you would use captions. Okay. So let's close and cover. I'm going to say yes. We're going to go ahead and say yes to this. The data integrity rules have changed. They're talking about the validation rule. When you get this, just say yes, we know, and you move on here. So I'm going to show you next a whole new topic here that's going to be creating what they refer to as a query. So let's hit the F11 key. Actually, I'm going to bring you over to the other database that we had that's already got records in it, so we don't have to do a lot of typing. Once you make your tables for your assignments, you'll see they'll be full of data there. And I'm going to close this one here. But we're now going to create what they call a query. Now again, let's go back. A table contains all of the basic information of your database. It's the core. You cannot have a database without data, obviously, and the tables would hold the data. I don't care how many queries, forms, reports, or those things you have, they're worthless if you don't have the tables. But once you have the tables, then we can start making the things that will make this a little bit more user-friendly. For example, we're going to make a form. Now, a form is what you use in order to make things more user-friendly. Now, for example, I'm going to go back to my other, I lied, I'm going to go back to the other database for just a minute. I'm going to open up the customer table again. I'm going to make a very simple form of that. In order to make a form of it, there's several ways. There's many ways to do this, but the one way, step one, is just to open the table. Step two, click Create. Step three, you click over here where it says Form. It says Form, Design, Blank Form. You want the first one that it says Form, and when you click it, you have instantly created a form. There is your form. Now you can click Save, and it'll automatically name the form whatever the name of the table was. So we click OK, and we now have our simple form. Let's now go back to the other database we had open a minute ago. We're going to now show you how to make a report. A report is basically the same as a form, except you cannot type anything in the report. The report is just for appearances only. Again, when you get a paycheck is a report. It was designed to come out to look like a check. There's lots of reports. Sometimes a report is nothing more than a list. But a form is used more for entering. It is used to be entering the data. And so you can put drop-down list boxes on it and things like that. So Here's how you make a report. Again, step one, open up the object. Now you can make a report of either a query or a table. But if you, let's open it, we're going to make a report of this table, for example. In order to make a report of this table, step one, you open the table. Step two, you click create. And step three, you click report over here in the reports. Same thing, it's the first one of all the reports. You got report design blank, we don't want those, we just want report. You click it, it will automatically make you this nice little report. Now, same thing, I can click save. It will automatically name the report customer. So we say, yeah, we want to save it as that, and you click OK. Now, we close it, and now we have created our report. Now, let's go back a little bit here. I want to inject something here that is really important. You can see as we get going through these tables and forms and reports that we're getting very sophisticated here. This is something else that's very important. Microsoft Access databases are actually a programming language. What you learn in this class, you can actually make these things look like a program, and they are actually a program. You are actually creating a computer program. The only thing is it must be run by Microsoft Access unless it is compiled, which we'll talk about later. But if it's not compiled, you just use it by opening up Microsoft Access. The only way they can run it is if they have Microsoft Access, again, or unless it's compiled. But I'm saying once you learn this, you are a programmer. And I will tell you that I have made many, many, many Access databases for clients around the country, literally. And it's very popular. This is a very good tool to know because it's a very user-friendly means of writing programs. The only kind of computer programs I cannot write with Microsoft Access is video games. I mean, even there I can make video games. It would be like asking questions. But I have hundreds of clients around the country. And all of them have been able to have anything they need using Microsoft Access. It's all contained in that. Any programming needs are done through that. Let's create what now they refer to as a simple query. Now again, I'm kind of backing up here a little bit. The query is in your book on page AC30. But the other things, I kind of jumped ahead. The form is on AC33. The report is AC35. And basically I did for you what they did there. So I'm going to show you two more things, and that'll be the end of our first session. So to create a simple query, a query is something that, let me just make another form. I made the other form in the other system, so I'm going to have it show. I'm going to click create form. I'm going to redo that real quick. There's the form. I'm going to close and save that. Over on our navigation pane over here, you can see all the tables we've created, the forms, and the report, the form and the report. And, excuse me, you can see there that that's why we have to name the system up front, because it contains tables, forms, and reports. It also contains what they call macros and queries. Now, a query is nothing more than a means of extracting certain records out of a table, because you may not need it all. Let me show you here. Let's go back to my original table here of customer. If I go back in here and I say, you know what, I really just need to see all of the customers from Holland, Michigan. A query would let you do that, but it will also let you choose what fields you don't want or do want. In other words, maybe all I want is the name of the customer's contacts and their phone number and their city, and that's all. See, in a table I can filter, but it's still very clumsy. But in a query I can break it down to getting very concise, so I have exactly and only what I need. So let's do that. So let me just show you here how to make a simple query. Okay, step one, we click create, and step two, we click query design. Now, when you do a query, again, we're pulling data from a table. So the first thing you have to do is to tell it, what table do I want to take the information from? I'm going to double click customer, and it pops it right up into the top. Then I come down here and I can close the show table screen. I can resize this little table thing up here just like I can a clip art if I want to see better. Or I could use it, I could put it back and I could use the scroll bar up and down. But it's probably better if I just widen it so I can see better. So if I want the contact last, and I'm going to double click, if I double click contact last name and then contact first name, it'll pop them down into the grid below in the order in which you double click them. So I'm going to double click the phone number and the address. Now this is what they call a simple query. If I click up here on this little exclamation point up here and run it, it will then show me the data. If I click run, you will see it shows me all of the records in that table, but only the records of the people I'm interested in. You know, I should say only the fields that I'm interested in: the last name, the first name, the phone number, and the address. Again, I can double click these little columns here and widen them so I can see better what I've got here. Now, please notice a couple things here. If I go up into the design view, this little pencil and T-square up here, if I click on it, it takes me back here, because now I'm going to double click city, so I can add it after the fact. Just like I did when I added the table field, I go into the design view, and I can do the same thing here. Now in this particular case, I can say only show me the people from Holland. So if I go into criteria, I type the word Holland in there, and then I click down below there just so it'll freeze in there, kind of like a spreadsheet. If you know spreadsheets, you know you go down to the row below it, it'll confirm what you have there. Then I click run, and it will only show me the people from Holland. So that is how I do a simple query. Now they're going to have you use the wizard to make a query. We can do that too. I'm going to come up here and click create and query wizard, and when you I'm going to save query one. We're going to name it. We're going to name that Holland. I'm sorry. Now I'm going to say OK. Now we're doing a new query wizard. Now we're going to do a simple query wizard. We're going to click OK, and we go in there. We're going to say, well, what table do we want? Well, we're going to use the table called customer. And if you same, I can double click here. I can just click once on contact last and send it over. Contact first and send it over. And I can do the phone number and send it over, the address and the city. Then I click next again. And same thing, I can click on what I want to title it. I'll just leave it customer query, and I click finish. What I'm saying is it gives us basically the same result. So I've shown you two ways to create a query. One way was to go to create and query design. That's the first one we did, and that's this one you're looking at here. Or we can go in here and go to query wizard, and it'll ask us what table, what fields, and it will create that one as well. So now we have our two queries there, both using the simple query method here. Okay. So one thing I wanted to show you here too, if I go back into this, I'm going to go back to customer query and go home, and you'll notice here if I double click it and open it up, now I have the pencil T-square up here, but only this is for a query. So if I click the pencil T-square here, I can go in here. I'm going to go into the phone number, and you'll see here we've got some phone numbers with an area code 616. So if I go to the phone number, I type in there 616 asterisk and hit enter. It'll put the word like in there. Now 616 asterisk, like 616 asterisk, that means give me anything that begins with 616. If I had done asterisk 616, it would say like, it's the reverse of it. That means give me anything that ends with 616. Now if I do this, if I do asterisk 616 and asterisk, that means if 616 is anywhere in that phone number, I want to see it. And I'm going to delete those last two there. We're going to say give me anything that begins with 616. So if I run that, you'll see it will show me only the phone numbers with the 616. So we've covered everything up in your book up through page A39. Actually, I didn't show you how to print. Let me do that real quick. When you open the report or form, you simply open it up and you simply click File and Print. Now this file print business, that's what they call the backstage view. This is the backstage view. So it's from there you can click print or start a new database or close your database or whatever you want to do. If you want to go back to your database, click this little backward or this leftward arrow here. It takes you right back. So that is how you print a report. And I'm going to save that query there. Last but not least, two more things. I lied, there's two more things. Then we'll be finished with this session. It should just be about an hour session here. One is that if you want to do a brand new table, you click Create and New Table. I can go in this table here will do me the data sheet view that we started with. If I go to create table design, you see that's the other way. I can do it either way. You remember when you built our first table, it started you out that way. So that's why we didn't have that opportunity. So I wanted to show you that. But lastly, you know how you may want to compact your database. As people enter data in, it becomes very inflated because we reserve a lot of room for fields, and if it's not used, it becomes very heavy. So what you can do is tell Microsoft to compact it. Sometimes it will take the number of bytes that is in its size. Anywhere I've seen it sometimes go from 150 megabytes down to 30 megs. Just because people entering records in all day, it tends to fluff it or puff it. And so we try to make it so that doesn't happen. Excuse me. So the way we get that to compact is step one, we go to File, and you see what you need is right there in that screen. You click Compact and repair the database. And that is what they're talking about on page 41, managing the database. It talks about compacting. So those are the hands-on things you can do. Before we close, I just kind of want to give you a few heads ups on some of the quiz questions we're going to be dealing with from this session. First, I mentioned a lot of them already, but just please remember things like about the structure, versus the table design view. The design view. The design view is what I showed you there, so there'll be a question about that. Also, if I open the table up here, what you can do is you can rename a table, a field, I should say. I'll open the table, I can rename a field. I can simply right-click on that field and then click Rename. That will be another quiz question. To delete a field, I would right-click on it and obviously click Delete the field. I can also delete a record by simply clicking here on what they call the record selector. The record selector is over here on the left, and that I can click on that and hit the delete key, and that will delete. So these are some of the questions they'll be. So again, hitting the record selector, hitting the delete key on your keyboard. Also, what you can do is, if I decide in the datasheet view I want to add another field, I can right-click on the field. I can click Insert Field. That's something else they'll be asking. I haven't shown you that yet. Also, if you want to remove a field, I can also just click on the field. Like I'm going to click on that one I just put in there and hit the delete key, and so that's something else that you can do. And please remember one last thing here, that when you restructure a table, restructuring does not mean anything about the data. It means you can add fields, remove fields, rename. All these things I was just doing was changing the structure. When I change the width of a field, all those things are restructuring. So those are the only things you need to know for our first lesson. So take a look at that, and then you can do your first assignment. Thanks, and we'll talk to you on the next one.